Josh and Caleb.
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Wearing my semi-sickness shirt. That is me. Right by CS. This is Caleb. Fun little shirt. They did couple years ago, I believe. Then we got our own logo, of course. So, thanks buddy. But has nothing to do with today's video. We will be talking about The Hobbit and how is nothing like Lord of the Rings, even though Peter Jackson thought it was. We're going to talk about that, how he went from doing the impossible with practical effects, some CGI in Lord of the Rings, to going full CGI with the Hobbit films. Shouldn't have been 3 really. We'll get to that as well. Lord of the Rings is thought to be unadaptable. You can't make those novels into films. You just can't do it. There's no way to shoot them. I mean, there's just no way to do it. And Peter Jackson took that as a challenge, because Peter Jackson started in practical effects. His first 3 movies all used practical effects. Bad Taste, great alien movie. Dead Alive, great gory masterpiece of practical effects. And Meet the Feebles, which is mainly puppets. Fun movie. All 3 brilliant uses of practical effects. Even The Frighteners, although it did use CGI, did use some practical effects as well. The dog was a puppet. Anyway, could grab that as well, but I didn't. So he knew practical effects pretty well when he started out to make Lord of the Rings. He also, in that time, started is it just Weta Effects? It's called something else. Weta Workshop. That's it, if I can read my notes. Weta Workshop, which before Lord of the Rings, to stay busy, they worked on Hercules and Xena. Did all the effects for those shows. I enjoy those shows very much. Before we get started, I'll recommend this bad boy, the Lord of the Rings Motion Picture Trilogy. These being the special extended DVD editions. They look like books. So cool. Over 9 hours of documentaries, all about how they did the effects on Lord of the Rings. This is great. I highly recommend getting this just for the behind the scenes. Some of the best I've seen for movies. So detailed, they break it down. Highly recommend getting this just for the documentaries. Not a huge fan of the extended editions. I think they're too long, but that's besides the point. Show some pictures of that. Just great documentary. Lord of the Rings used a number of filming techniques you had to accomplish the impossible task of adapting Tolkien's master novels, some of them being forced perspective, how they made the hobbits and go, on the same place. Miniatures, they used a bunch of miniatures. Prosthetic makeup effects for the orcs. Doubles for the hobbits to stand in to get that cool shot. They made their own weapons. Weta did. Like hundreds of thousands of weapons. Yeah, so those are just a few. There's many more, like Return of the King. I think it used the most techniques in one film ever. I could be wrong about that, but like a bunch of stuff. Miniatures, forced perspective. I think they even had paintings and whatnot. Anyway, could be wrong about that, but I think I remember hearing something about that. Alright, so now we will get to, I'll just have them all on Blu-ray, Return of the King, Two Towers, and Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. Great trilogy, one of my favorite trilogies of all time, possibly the best trilogy ever made. My favorite would be Star Wars, obviously the original trilogy without the special effects, George. The original version, but so good. Love the Lord of the Rings films. Now we will get to The Hobbit. It was supposed to be directed by Guillermo del Toro, but after a few years of working on it, he had to leave because he always has like 20 projects going at one time. So eventually he had to leave, and they tried looking for another director, but eventually Peter Jackson's like, I'll just do it, I'll direct it. At that point it was only going to be 2 films. So then they started filming, and Warner Brothers / New Line was like, hey, let's see if we can add a 3rd movie. Which it doesn't warrant 3 movies. You could probably squeeze all of it into 1 movie, actually. Because there's a lot of buffer and fill in this trilogy. We'll talk about that. Hobbit uses almost all CGI. Outside of the makeup for the dwarves and a few other things, all CGI all the time. Which, I mean, I know Pete Jackson wasn't spending the money himself, but they made a lot of dumb decisions where you're like, you could have just used the person in makeup. And we'll get to that a little later. I have a instance of that occurring. And the weapons. They made the weapons themselves, much like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but it was a big departure. The orcs were done all CG, which I still to this day do not understand that. Because here's what they look like in makeup. Okay? I'll move over a little. That's what they look like in makeup. How cool do they look? Okay, now here's CG. Yeah. They look so bad in CG. Just like a plain white orc both of them. I'm like, how do you get from the practical, which looked pretty cool and menacing, to like white milk, basically, in orc form? Like, he looks like one of those pre-made characters you would get on, like, Skyrim or something like that. Like, just very generic, nothing scary at all about it, except his little hook hand, but nothing scary about the orcs in The Hobbit. That is like, why would you not use the makeup effects? That looks so cool. Why did he think, okay, that looks cool, but if we did CG, think how cool that would be. And then they got the character design back, and he's like, yep, that one's it. I mean, come on, Jackson. How? I know you can use CG for cool things, but that's a head scratcher to me, how you could look at the effects they did for those orcs. But to be honest, I think Guillermo was the reason they did makeup effects. And then Jackson came in and changed it. I could be wrong about that, but there's no way he saw the makeup effects and went, no, I want a generic CGI orc. Ultimately, it's a story of a man who did not have enough time to fulfill every vision he had about The Hobbit. Ultimately rushed it. They had to get all 3 movies done in a certain amount of time because each one was released exactly a year after the other. So once they started, they had to keep the machine going. And adapting The Hobbit, which I read in school and did a paper on, there's only 300 and something pages. There's no way you can get a whole trilogy on 300 pages. So they had to make up characters, they had to make up a romance which was forced and didn't work. They had to make up storylines about a character who's barely mentioned a couple characters who are barely mentioned in the book, and they get their whole own story arcs. Like, none of it made any sense. They should have taken the time, done one great movie, or possibly 2 movies. There's no way it should have been 3 movies. No way. Peter Jackson. Absolutely not. Now we're going to check out a few comparisons. I've already talked about the orcs. We'll mention a few more, like the battles, for example. So we'll do a rundown. Unexpected Journey, I did like. It felt the most Lord of the Rings. Gollum was in there, of course, with his riddle, which was a great part of the book. So, Unexpected Journey, I did enjoy. Desolation of Smaug is one, it worked in some parts, but, a lot of filler. And the third one just felt so forced. You could have added all this in the second one, but they tried to make a whole movie out of the leftover stuff. And the army, the battle, we'll get to that. Okay, so 2 battles in Lord of the Rings / Hobbit movies. If you compare, the best battle is the Battle of Helm's Deep from the 2 Towers. You can fight me on that. Best battle. In fact, we'll show some pictures. Great use of practical effects. obviously CG was used, but was used correctly. Okay, now you look at Battle of the Five Armies. Not great at all. In fact, the Dwarf King, Dane Arnfoot, I'm pretty sure I'm correct, Billy Connolly played him. Well, I say played him, he virtually just gave him the voice, because he is all CG. Like, that's another example of, like, it would have been better just shoot his face with makeup. Why did Peter Jackson think, no, that's not working for me, let's just CG the whole character, that'll work. Like, some of his decisions were like, why? That doesn't even make sense. Like Cats the movie, using CG when they could have used fursuits. Makes no sense. You just shoot him, at least his face, that would have given the character some realism. That's what he looked like. I saw it with like 10 people, and we all busted out laughing when he popped up on screen, 'cause he looked so fake. You could tell it was rushed. Anyway, to end on somewhat of a positive note, I will say the extended editions, much like the Lord of the Rings, have some great behind the scenes, and that's just a cool release of it. I'm not sure how I feel. I mean, extended editions for Lord of the Rings I think are too long, but these I can't really compare because I don't really watch the Hobbit films like as much as Lord of the Rings, so I can't really say for certain which are better, but these are good at least for the behind the scenes. So yeah, ultimately Jackson should not have directed the films. Should not have been 3 movies. The Hobbit book is a much different tone than the Lord of the Rings novels. It's leans more into comedy, like adventure, whereas the Lord of the Rings are more serious. You know, he's got to take the ring to Mordor. Very serious tone. Hobbit is more comedy for kids. So maybe George should have directed the Hobbit films. He knows how to cater to kids. Anyway, ultimately, he tried to fit the style of Lord of the Rings into the Hobbit, and it didn't work. Ultimately, it did not work. I was excited for the Hobbit film. Ultimately, I probably like the Star Wars prequels more than the Hobbit films, so that's saying something. Maybe even more the Disney Star Wars episodes. That's a deep cut, but possibly. So Hobbit could have been great. In fact, the first movie I did enjoy because it hit that tone of the book, but man, did it fall off the rails. Should not have been 3 movies. Alright, let's go ahead and do it. What do you guys think of these practical effects videos? Did you learn something? That's most important. Do you enjoy these movies? That would be... I mean, I enjoy all of them, obviously, because I still have them, but could have been a lot better. That was my point on practical effects. Could have been so much better. I mean, just a few things, change a few things, add a little realism, and it would have worked. Maybe not for The Hobbit, because the story was very weak, because they were going off 300 pages, but something like the Thing prequel could have gone a long way. Alright, that's going to do it. Hope you guys have enjoyed this series. I'm Josh. More videos coming as always. Until then, if I don't see you out thrifting or at Walt Disney World, I will see you at the movies. Bye. Seriously, Peter, those orcs look so fake. Couldn't bear. You did a great docu-series, though, on the Beatles Get Back, so you have that going. Alright, that's going to do it. No more practical effects videos. Alright, bye.